What's going on, guys? Apathettic here with all your tips, recommendations, and everything in between. And today I'm going to walk you through step by step what is the best Arc Warlock build in 2020. We'll be covering everything from the subclass to use, the weapon loadouts you should focus on, and the stats and armor you should aim for to optimize your Warlock. So if you're someone who isn't sold on Top Tree Dawn and is looking for the next best option, you're going to want to stick around. The last thing I'll add is majority of my footage is captured during my streams on Twitch, so make sure you drop a follow using the link below if you want to see more gameplay like this live. With that, let's get into it. Before we get in depth into our subclass of choice, we need to cover the basics. What this entails is making sure we have the optimal class ability, grenade, and jump selected for our Warlock. This ensures we have a solid foundation to get the most out of our subclass. Starting with our Rift, and for competitive PvP, it's hard to choose against the Healing Rift. The Healing Rift allows us to anchor down different points of the map proactively by gaining an overshield after a short time and giving us an advantage in our next engagement. This also makes it great for taking on multiple enemies since our health is constantly regenerating in the Rift. It also puts a little pressure on our enemies to land their shots, since missing a shot, even when we are weaker, can mean they lose the fight as our health continuously regens. The Rift is not only an offensive option, of course, as many people tend to use it more defensively. It's great for getting a recovery started quicker when an enemy is pushing you, using the animation to third person peek around walls, and getting just a small enough bump in our health to re-engage our enemy a little faster. All these things boost our survivability by either directly increasing our health or giving us more information to make a more decisive call on how to engage the enemy. Moving on to our grenade, and for Arc we have three really good options here, and it's important we pick the option that has the best chance to get tagged for damage on our enemy, as that will be key when getting into our subclass. That makes Storm Grenade the best choice. The reason we chose a Storm Grenade over other options is because of one big reason: Hunters. That's right, Hunters. The reason I say that is because Hunters can easily dodge to avoid an Arc Bolt grenade, making it useless, and for Pulse grenades, they can't dodge it per se, but it'd be relatively easy for them to avoid, and it does less damage than the other options. The advantage of a Storm Grenade is it has an initial damage when it lands, and then a second wave of damage when the lightning hits. This gives us two chances at tagging our enemies with damage, raising the chances of us triggering Arc Web, which we will get more into detail later. The Storm Grenade is also very hard for Hunters to dodge, and since Hunters make up, 97% of the Crucible, it's important we have a grenade that can start chaining damage no matter what class someone is using. The Storm Grenade is also great against Titan barricades or when enemies are grouped up, since it has a very large radius and again has the two waves of damage that often catch your enemies off guard. Lastly, we have our jump for Warlock, and that's going to be Burst Glide. Burst Glide is the one Warlock jump that will give us the most effective Warlock skate because of the burst of speed it provides us. This allows us to get around the map a lot faster and spend a lot less time floating helplessly in the air. It also has the most linear jump of all the options and allows us to head towards our enemy in more of a straight line versus getting a little too much air on other characters. This results in a very fluid and fast movement and dramatically increases the feel and efficiency of our movement on Warlock, and in my opinion makes Warlock feel like one of the fastest classes in Destiny 2. Getting into our subclass of choice is the best Arc subclass for Warlock, and it's Top Tree Stormcaller. This subclass brings a very strong neutral game along with an equally powerful super, and those two meet when we talk about our first perk, Transcendence. When cast with full grenade and melee energy, Storm Trance lasts longer and fully restores health. Transcendence is probably one of the most powerful aspects of this subclass, since it increases your overall super duration by 5 seconds, and while this doesn't sound like a lot, I assure it's more than enough to get a couple more kills or get us out of dodge as our super ends. This perk also pairs incredibly well with our exotic choice for this competitive build, making the super even more lethal. The other awesome aspect of this perk is its clutch ability from the instant health regen you get when popping your Storm Trance. This can come in handy in those last second moments where the enemy is trying to finish you off and you pop your Storm Trance and trigger Transcendence, giving you full health and potentially setting us up to finish off the entire team. Now, I don't recommend trying to intentionally be low health when you use this, but again, it's nice to know it's there. The only downside of this perk is you need to pay close attention to your ability cooldowns. Doing this helps us be more intentional with how we use our grenade and melee abilities, but at the same time can also lead us to holding on to those abilities too often, hurting our overall neutral game. It's important when you're looking to activate this perk to find the balance between being overly conservative with your abilities versus being intentional. Next in the subclass tree, we have Ionic Blink. Activate teleport during Storm Trance. Ionic Blink is a huge part of what makes Top Tree Stormcaller so lethal in Super. This ability gives us a short distance blink that can be utilized in multiple ways. The first way is to close the gap on our enemies, and while doing so take as little damage as possible. It makes the overall amount of ground you're able to cover in the Super feel much faster, and thus makes it harder to escape from. The second way this ability can be utilized is to create space between us and our enemies. When you feel an enemy rushing you with a shotgun, it allows us to teleport backwards, creating space and reducing or eliminating the damage we would have taken and allowing us to safely use our tickle fingers to finish off our enemy. This same scenario is especially good against supers like Spectral Blades and Bottom Tree Striker. Both supers require getting somewhat close to you, and being able to teleport backwards and bait them into your tickle fingers is an easy way to win those super versus super duels. Overall, the biggest impact this ability has is how it makes you much harder to track when in super. Jumping into the air and dodging up and behind your enemies can be very hard to track and allows us to easily finish off kills while taking minimal damage. But a bit of caution is needed here because using your Ionic Blink excessively will greatly reduce the amount of time we can spend in our super. Trust me when I say it's not a great feeling coming out of super mid Ionic Blink and landing helplessly in front of the enemy team. Our next perk is Arc Web. Enemies damaged by your grenades chain deadly lightning to nearby enemies. Each grenade or melee chain returns grenade energy. This perk is really what makes this subclass tree one of my personal favorites. First, starting with the chaining effect that this has, earlier we discussed the importance of having a grenade that can effectively tag an enemy, and hence why we went with a Storm Grenade. With a Storm Grenade and its 2 waves of damage, it optimizes our chances of landing the tags and creating a chaining effect. How this works best in the Crucible is by using it when you know there are at least 2 enemies near each other, but the more the better. Once the chaining begins, you'll be able to see all the damage through the walls, which is feeding you information on how your enemies are moving and roughly how much damage is being done. This is what makes the Arc Web ability paired with the Storm Grenade such a great play starter. It's great for tagging multiple enemies and doing some decent damage and opening up an opportunity for your team to push in and take advantage. It also has the effect of disrupting the enemy team's positioning since they'll be forced to get away from each other or continue to take more damage. This ability is especially useful against more passive teams that love to stick together and forces them to adapt to a playstyle that they may not be used to. The icing on the cake with this ability is the fact that the more chains you get, the more grenade energy you get. Meaning if we are effective with our Storm Grenades, you could find yourself in a scenario where your grenade is always at the ready. I'll also add that the chaining effect also applies to our melee, but I don't find it nearly as useful as the grenade, since with the grenade you typically have a lot more chaining happening. Overall, mastering your grenade placement with this subclass will pay huge dividends in how effective you find Arc Web to be. Rounding out the subclass, we have Chain Lightning. This electrocuting melee ability chains lightning from the struck target to nearby enemies. While this ability may seem fairly straightforward, it does have a couple of benefits that fly under the radar. The first being the pure speed that this melee ability is executed with. In my experience, this melee ability just seems to execute faster than other melee abilities, making it great for shotgunning. It results in winning a lot of 1v1 shotgun duels where it comes down to who can land their melee first. The other benefit is how efficiently this melee ability locks onto your enemies. It can sometimes feel like an enemy is almost off my screen, then my melee will instantly lock on, doing some nice damage. Combining the speed and lock-on capabilities of this melee make it very efficient in doing the simple task of just landing, because we all know how melee registration can be at times in Destiny 2. Overall, this is one of my favorite melee abilities in Destiny 2, and it's because of how reliable it is. Diving into our weapons and loadouts that will pair the best with this subclass, I'm going to break it into 2 parts for you. The first part is for consoles and the second part for PC. Now right off, I'll say that this subclass in my opinion is much better for shotgunning, so that is mainly what I'm going to be recommending here. Doesn't mean you can't snipe, but it may not be optimal on this subclass. Getting into our actual weapons for console, you're going to want to run a 600 RPM of your choice, such as Gnawing Hunger or the Summoner, since they have a great ease of use in comparison to hand cannons. Another great new option here is Traveler's Chosen, which will work for PC or console because not only is it a top tier sidearm, but also allows us to get our abilities much quicker with its exotic perk Gathering Light. This means more chaining and always ensuring we have our grenade and melee so we can pop Transcendence without having to worry about holding on to our abilities. In terms of shotguns, I recommend a Fellwinter's Lie if you have one, or Astral Horizon is also an amazing choice here since aggressive frame shotguns tend to be the most consistent because of their high damage. For PC, I still recommend the same shotguns I just mentioned, with the only difference being that 150 RPM hand cannons like Thorn or Dire Promise are great options along with 600 RPM auto rifles, so choose the weapon type you feel best benefits the style of play you prefer. For armor and stats, it's important that we focus on acquiring armor that has a roll of 60 or higher. The reason this is important is it helps balance out the other stats that we are less focused on, making all our cooldowns as low as possible. In terms of armor stats that I focus on for this build, I focus on recovery and intellect first, with discipline as a distant third. This boosts my survivability in a big way. Since I won't need as much time to recover in between fights, it also ensures I have a better chance at regaining some health if an enemy is trying to push me. It also has the dual benefit of decreasing the cooldown of my Rift. Intellect comes next and is especially important in this build since the super has so many advantages, especially when we proc Transcendence. For my intellect, I aim for 6 or higher and don't usually go higher than 8 intellect. After tier 8, you start seeing some diminishing returns, and you're probably sacrificing some other stats that could benefit your neutral game more. By having your intellect in the 6 to 8 tier range, we are optimizing our ability to potentially get our super multiple times per game, or be one of the first to have it. Discipline is the last stat that I would try to improve for this competitive build if I have some wiggle room after recovery and intellect. The reason here is simple. The more grenades I can get, the more chances I have to proc Arc Web and get that chaining going. As for the other mods, you want to make sure you're running enhanced targeting and enhanced unflinching for your weapon of choice, along with double scavengers for your special weapon of choice to make sure you always have special ammo. This pairs well with running mods like pump action or remote connection that generate additional super energy on kills with shotgun or snipers. Don't underestimate the impact your armor and stats can have on your game. You could be handicapping yourself and not even know it. For Warlock, there are a couple exotics that really stand out, but one for this particular build really rises above. That is Crown of Tempest with the exotic perk Conduction Tines. Arc ability curls increase the recharge rate of your arc abilities and extend the duration of Storm Trance. Crown of Tempest really complements this build well since it aids in the regeneration of our abilities and increases the duration of our super as we get kills. How it works is with each arc ability kill you get 1 stack of Conduction Tines that stacks up to 3 times, giving us a nice boost to our ability regen. In terms of increasing our super duration, it can increase our super's duration by up to 8 seconds depending on kills, how often we use our ionic blink, and how much we use our attack. How it works for the super is it doesn't regen super energy, but it slows down how fast our super depletes. This combined with Transcendence makes for an incredibly long super, and in some cases so long that I'm able to go from one spawn to the other. Crown of Tempest adds a reliable amount of regen to an already potent neutral game, and then tops it off by doubling down on our ability to increase the duration of our super, making this competitive arc build top tier. If you're looking to equip your other characters with top tier builds, check out the videos on the screen to make sure all your characters have the best loadouts possible. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe as it's a free way to support me, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.